For more than 2,000 years, the parables of Jesus have been heard, repeated, and revered around the world. But what if their true power were not only in the visible words, but in the secrets hidden beneath their surface? What if every story were, in fact, an inner map toward the transformation of your mind, your life, and your destiny? This text is not just another interpretation. It is a sacred key, a gateway to the metaphysical meaning of the kingdom, revealed through the profound spiritual vision of Emmet Fox. Here you will discover that the kingdom of heaven is not a distant place, but a state of consciousness that can be activated here and now. Each parable you will hear is a spark of power, a living teaching that awakens faith, dismantles fear, heals the mind, and reshapes your reality from the inside out. This is not just about religion. This is about spiritual laws in action, about universal principles capable of transforming your health, your relationships, your prosperity, and your purpose. Prepare to see these eternal words as you never have before. Prepare to hear and understand from a higher level, for when the eyes of the soul open, the kingdom ceases to be a promise and becomes an experience. Welcome to Secrets of the Kingdom. Here begins your journey into the truth that has always lived within you. Parables were not pious stories, nor rhetorical ornaments. They were not tools used by a teacher trying to be understood by ignorant peasants. Nor were they formulas to decorate sermons. Jesus' parables are living codes, revealed mental structures, symbols of laws operating within the human soul. Each one is a condensed formula containing a spiritual law, a mental warning, and a promise of redemption. Jesus spoke in parables because those who have not yet awakened to the truth cannot assimilate the principle directly. The unprepared soul becomes confused before the light. That is why Christ taught through images, scenes, and stories that penetrate the subconscious mind without resistance. Every human being lives within a parable. Your entire life is an allegory of your ideas, your convictions, your fears, and your expectations. Just as the sower plants his seed in the ground, you plant your thoughts in the soil of your subconscious. Just as the Father awaits the return of the prodigal son, the inner Christ waits for the soul to return from its mental distractions and recognize the spiritual inheritance it has always possessed. Just as the Good Samaritan heals the wounded on the road, you must apply the mercy of understanding to the wounds you have caused yourself with your mistaken judgments. The parable, then, is not an external story. It is a mirror of your inner state. It is a coded message which, when deciphered, becomes a key to open a mental prison you yourself built with wrong ideas. Jesus was not a popular preacher improvising stories to win affection. He was the supreme knower of the structure of the human mind. His parables do not address reason, but the deeper level of consciousness, where destinies are determined. Each parable he narrated is a living seed that, when understood with an open mind and a willing heart, germinates into concrete transformation. There is no innocent parable, no decorative phrase, no literary embellishment. There is exact, active spiritual science, and that science is the internal Christ operating in the human mind through symbol. This book is a journey into the hidden meaning of those parables, not to admire them, nor to repeat them as empty prayers, but to activate them, to make them flesh, conduct, mentality, habit. The kingdom of God is not a place reached after death. The kingdom is a mental structure activated when you think in alignment with the truth. Parables teach you how to think in harmony with that truth, how to leave behind the mental habits that keep you limited, sick, in conflict, or dissatisfied. Jesus did not come to found religions. He came to awaken the truth in every consciousness, and he did so by encoding it in the form of parables. Literal interpretation of these parables has obscured their original message. Many souls have sought outside what these teachings have always offered within. They have read about the sower but have not examined the soil of their own mind. They have repeated the story of the prodigal son, but have not undertaken the inner journey back. At first they have celebrated the Good Samaritan, but have not exercised compassion toward their own wounds. This book seeks to correct that omission. It seeks to reveal that each parable is a precise guide to reprogram your subconscious, transform your perception, and manifest a new life from the inside out. Each chapter delves deeply into a parable, breaking down its structure, translating its symbol, interpreting its key, and applying its principle. This is not about explanation from doctrine, emotion, or theology, but from the spiritual science of thought. We will not speak of morality, but of mental law. We will not present judgments, but keys. We will not exalt suffering, but power. This is the science of the Christ within you, taught by Jesus in the form of parables. Prepare to deprogram everything you have believed about God, sin, punishment, worthiness, and divine will. There is no room here for guilt, fear, or submission. There is only space for awakening, for consciousness, for understanding, for the decision to live according to the inner Christ. Parables are mirrors, and this book is a lamp that will help you see what they reflect. If you decide to read to the end, you will not walk through someone else's garden, but discover the map to your inner freedom. This is not about learning, but remembering. Not about studying, but awakening. Not about God above, but the Christ within. Begin now, because everything you are about to discover has already been planted within you from the beginning. And this book is the water that seed has been waiting for. Secrets of the Kingdom, the parables of Jesus from a metaphysical perspective. Based on the teachings of Emmet Fox, we have noticed that more than 80% of those visiting our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Before we continue, let me remind you that if you want to learn how to use the law of attraction to improve your life, I've created a completely free guide for you. You have the link in the description. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The Parable of the Sower and the Law of the Subconscious. Everything that happens in your life is the result of what you have sown in your mind. There are no exceptions, no accidents, no chance. If you experience scarcity, pain, failure, or conflict, it is because such conditions have been sown, nurtured, and maintained, perhaps without your awareness, in the fertile soil of your subconscious. And if there is peace, health, harmony, and progress, it is because such fruits have grown from seeds sown with consciousness, persistence, and faith. This principle is absolute, and Jesus taught it with masterful clarity in the first and most fundamental of his parables, the parable of the sower. The Gospel according to Matthew chapter 13 says, "The sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and ate them. Some fell on rocky ground where there was little soil, and it sprouted quickly. But when the sun rose, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered. Some fell among thorns, and the thorns grew and choked it. But some fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Jesus did not leave this parable unexplained. In the same chapter, he decoded it, but few understand the depth of his teaching. Jesus described not types of listeners, but mental states. He did not speak of people, but of levels of consciousness. Each type of soil represents a way in which the mind receives and processes ideas, and in that reception, everything is decided. The seed is truth, the seed is thought, the seed is principle. It is identical in every case. What changes is the soil, and the soil is the subconscious. The soil along the path represents the superficial, neglected mind that hears a spiritual idea and lets it pass without reflection. This is the individual who hears about the power of positive thinking or about scientific prayer and says, "That sounds nice," but immediately returns to their worries without internalizing anything. This mind leaves the seed exposed. The birds of the air, symbols of fleeting thoughts, old mental habits, external criticism, come and devour it. Nothing germinates, nothing transforms. It is a life on autopilot. The rocky soil is the enthusiastic mind, but without depth. The person who hears a truth becomes excited, proclaims it for a few days, but has not removed the stones of fear, resentment, or judgment. Thus the idea does not take root. A couple of setbacks, a disappointment, a misunderstanding, and the thought withers. The person says, "I tried that positive thinking thing, but it didn't work." It was not the seed, it was the soil. The soil with thorns represents the mind filled with attachments to appearances. People who believe in God, study metaphysics, pray, but who are simultaneously governed by fear of judgment, addiction to drama, and excessive concern for material things. In this mind, the spiritual idea does germinate, but it cannot grow. The thorns, thoughts of lack, competition, anxiety, anger, choke it. The person prays but doubts, affirms but complains, visualizes but criticizes. The result is a lukewarm life without real transformation. And finally, the good soil. This is the worked, cleaned, deep, fertile mind. It is the consciousness that has learned to set aside time for silence, that has forgiven, that has unlearned fear, that watches its thoughts and corrects them. In this soil, truth does bear fruit, and that fruit is not limited. Jesus speaks of yields of 30, 60, and even 100-fold. In other words, a single spiritual idea sown in good soil can multiply into abundance, health, peace, freedom, love, and full realization. This parable is fundamental because it establishes the most important spiritual law of all. Every thought accepted into your subconscious produces an equivalent result in your outer life. That is the law of the subconscious. There are no exceptions. What you sow, you harvest. If you sow hatred, you reap conflict. If you sow guilt, you reap punishment. If you sow fear, you reap lack. But if you sow love, faith, forgiveness, understanding, and joy, you will harvest a blessed and harmonious life. Now, how do you sow an idea into the subconscious? Repeating it mechanically is not enough. Writing it 10 times is not enough. The subconscious accepts an idea when it is repeated with faith, feeling, and concentration. Scientific prayer, meditation, visualization, and conscious affirmation are tools for sowing, but the soil must be clean. A mind full of hatred cannot sow peace. A mind trapped in complaint cannot sow prosperity. First the soil is cleared, then the seed is sown. Jesus made it clear. The seed is good in all cases. God does not fail. The principle does not weaken. Truth is eternal. The only variable factor is the soil, your mind, your responsibility. This parable is not for admiration, it is for self-examination. What kind of soil is your mind today? Do you let the birds devour your positive thoughts? Are there stones of resentment buried, thorns of fear, jealousy, guilt, or criticism? Are you willing to turn your mind into good soil? No external power can prevent you from transforming your subconscious. No one can contaminate your mental soil without your permission. But you must do the work. The subconscious is reprogrammed with persistence, not with emotion, pretty phrases, or extraordinary events, but with mental discipline. This parable is speaking to you now. It is saying, everything you need is already in the seed. Choose your thoughts wisely. Cultivate your mind responsibly, and then you will see the kingdom of God manifest in your life, not as a mysterious miracle, but as the natural result of conscious sowing. Jesus said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." This is not a metaphor. This is a law operating right now at this very moment in your mind, with every thought you accept, every idea you cultivate, every emotion you repeat. Do not expect to harvest peace while sowing fear. Do not expect health if you sow judgment. Do not expect blessings if you sow resentment. Examine your mind, evaluate your soil, and begin today to sow only that which you wish to multiply. As the Master said, the kingdom of God is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. You are that man, your mind is that field, and this is the moment to sow. Chapter 2, The Weeds and the Wheat, Mental Discrimination in the Face of Appearance. In the same chapter 13 of the Gospel according to Matthew, Jesus continues revealing the laws of the kingdom with another parable inseparable from that of the sower, the parable of the wheat and the weeds. Here it is no longer only about the act of sowing, but about what happens once the process of spiritual growth has begun. Even a mind that has already sown correctly, that has received the truth and cultivated it with faith, can face a greater challenge, the simultaneous appearance of positive and negative results in its experience. And if this law is not understood, the soul may become confused and abandon its path precisely when it most needs to remain steadfast. The parable says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the plants sprouted and bore grain, then the weeds also appeared. The servants of the master came and said, 'Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?' He answered, 'An enemy has done this.' The servants asked, 'Do you want us to go and pull them up?' He said, 'No, lest while pulling up the weeds you also uproot the wheat. Let both grow together until the harvest. At harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first, tie them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn.'" Here Jesus reveals an essential principle of mental work. The wheat and the weeds grow together for a time. This means that in human experience, correct thoughts and erroneous thoughts, harmonious manifestations and disturbing manifestations, can coexist simultaneously without implying that spiritual work has been in vain. Many abandon the spiritual path because, despite praying, affirming, and visualizing, they continue to face conflicts or limitations. They believe this indicates failure. But this parable clarifies the phenomenon. The presence of weeds does not invalidate the sowing of wheat. The weeds represent old beliefs, unconscious mental habits, and erroneous thoughts sown before spiritual awakening. They represent the mental past that still exerts its influence in the present. They represent mental karma, not as punishment, but as the result of the law of sowing and harvesting operating with precision. The weeds also symbolize deceptive appearances that arise to test faith. They are not punishments, but opportunities to exercise mental discrimination. The most common error at this stage is trying to pull the weeds forcibly. That is, attempting to eliminate negative effects without eradicating their deep mental causes. Or worse, losing calm in the face of undesirable results and destroying the spiritual work already initiated with doubt or despair. That is why the master of the field says, "Do not pull the weeds lest you also uproot the wheat." This is a law. The mental process must not be interrupted by impatience or hasty judgment. Mental discrimination in the face of appearance consists of recognizing that evil has no substance, only appearance, and that appearance only has power if you accept it as real. Seeing weeds does not mean the wheat has failed. It means there is a process underway. Jesus teaches that both must be allowed to grow until the harvest. What is the harvest? It is the moment when consciousness is mature enough to distinguish clearly between truth and illusion. It is when you have acquired enough inner mastery to observe without reacting, to think without falling into fear, to speak from truth, even when everything around you seems contrary. It is not then about violently uprooting the weeds, but about continuing to affirm the truth with patience. The harvest is not rushed. Transformation is not forged through anxiety. In spiritual practice, you will often notice thoughts that contradict your new faith. You will see emotions that seem inconsistent with your decrees. You will hear internal voices questioning your value, your right, your path. That is the weeds. Do not stop. Do not fight it. Do not give it power. Keep sowing. Keep praying. Keep acting from truth. The time of the harvest will come, and in that moment, all that is false will be bound in bundles and consumed, and what is true will be stored in the barn. That is established in your mind as permanent consciousness. The kingdom of God is not an immediate result. It is a mental process of progressive purification. During this process, the weeds manifest to be observed, understood, and discarded without violence. Error is not fought. It is dissolved through lack of attention. Evil is not corrected. It is replaced by the affirmation of good. That is why, in the presence of weeds, Jesus does not say, rebuke them or pull them out, but rather, let them grow. Observe, understand, and persevere in your spiritual affirmation. That is the discipline of the mature soul. This parable also shows that the mind must be constantly watched. The weeds were sown while men slept. This represents a lack of attention, neglect of mental vigilance. Every time you lower your guard and allow negative thoughts, destructive emotions, or judgmental words to enter your mind unresisted, you are spiritually asleep. And in that sleep, weeds are sown. Spiritual vigilance consists of observing what you think, what you believe, what you repeat. Consciousness is not strengthened by mystical events, but by daily discipline. Thus, the parable of the wheat and the weeds teaches three fundamental laws of the spiritual process. Every transformation involves a period in which good and evil, old and new, coexist. One must not fight error, but maintain attention on truth. Mental vigilance is indispensable to prevent new erroneous sowing. For those awakening to the truth, this parable offers comfort and direction. If today in your life you see contradictory situations, moments of light followed by shadows, progress accompanied by setbacks, clarity mixed with doubt, do not despair. You are seeing the weeds. But if you continue cultivating the wheat, if you continue praying, affirming, and acting from principle, the harvest will come. The kingdom is not won by force, but by persistence, not by imposition, but by understanding. Everything that grows in your life was first sown in your mind, That is the law. And if you learn to discern between wheat and weeds within yourself, no external appearance can lead you astray. The Christ within you is not impatient, confused, or weakened. He knows that the kingdom is already in motion and that the fruit will come at its perfect time. Practical exercise 1. Cultivating your inner change. Objective: learn to identify and discriminate the thoughts, the seeds, you cultivate in your subconscious. Instructions: observation without judgment. For 3 consecutive days, note every negative, limiting, repetitive, or conflicting thought that arises in your mind. Do not justify or suppress it. Simply record it. This is your weeds. Record affirmations. Also note every positive, hopeful, or truth-based thought that arises spontaneously or that you have consciously affirmed. This is your wheat seed. Daily review. Each night, compare both lists. Ask yourself sincerely which type of thought you gave more attention to, which you nourished with emotion. Act of conscious sowing. After your daily review, write 3 new affirmations aligned with the truth you wish to manifest. Write them calmly, in silence, with faith. Then read them aloud before sleeping. You are sowing. Symbolic visualization. Imagine your mind as a field. Visualize gently removing the weeds without disturbing the soil. Then imagine sowing golden seeds of light representing your new thoughts. Practice this for 7 full days. This exercise is not symbolic, it is real and transformative. Your inner field will begin to respond, and you will know you are on the right path. Now that you have understood these 2 fundamental parables, you are ready to move from cultivation to excavation. In the coming chapters, we will discover how to unearth the hidden treasures that already exist deep within your consciousness. Because what you seek is not far away. It has always been within, waiting to be discovered. Chapter 3: The Hidden Treasure, Discovering Your Latent Potential. Most human beings walk through life as if inhabiting sacred ground without knowing it. They live as spiritual paupers, unaware that right beneath their steps sleeps an immense power, an untouchable wealth, a luminous source of health, joy, and fulfillment. They dwell atop their own treasure, but they have not discovered it. Not because it is far away, not because it is inaccessible, but because it is hidden in plain sight. This is the teaching contained in one of Jesus' shortest, yet most powerful parables, the parable of the hidden treasure. Matthew 13:44 says, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found, and in his joy went and sold all that he had, and bought that field." The parable does not linger on adornments. It is direct, simple, yet within its few words it contains one of the most fundamental keys to spiritual growth. The field is your mind. The treasure is your divine potential. The act of discovering it represents the first conscious glimpse of the Christ within. And the decision to sell everything to acquire the field signifies total commitment to your spiritual process. The abandonment of all previous illusions, the definitive act of redemption of your consciousness. No human being is without treasure. Everyone possesses it, but not everyone discovers it. Why? Because the treasure is hidden beneath layers of mistaken beliefs, destructive mental habits, inherited judgments, unhealed wounds, and borrowed ideas. These layers prevent you from seeing the real power within you. It is not a matter of acquiring the treasure, because it already belongs to you by divine inheritance. It is a matter of unearthing it, of removing what covers it, of discovering it. The parable says that a man finds the treasure by chance. This is a spiritual key. Many times awakening begins with a crisis, a question, a nameless search. It does not occur through intellectual effort, but through the soul's longing. One day in the midst of your routine, a phrase shakes you, a book calls you, a prayer pierces you, a painful situation forces you to look deeper, and then, without fully understanding how, you glimpse something different. A silent force you didn't know you had, an inner peace that does not come from the outside, a sudden clarity you haven't reasoned. That is the sign that you have touched the treasure. You do not yet possess it, but you already know it exists. Then the parable says that the man hides it again. This gesture holds a deep truth. The treasure cannot be shared before it has been integrated. Initial enthusiasm must transform into discipline. There is a silent, almost secret stage in which the soul withdraws from the external world to work internally. It is not about fleeing, but about consolidating. The treasure is not displayed, it is embodied. Wisdom is not preached, it is lived. And for that, one must first acquire the field. And here comes the crucial moment. The man goes and sells all that he has to buy the field. This is the part that many are unwilling to perform. They want the treasure, but they do not want to pay the price. They want peace, but they will not abandon criticism. They want prosperity, but do not relinquish fear. They want health, but do not let go of guilt. They want to live in truth, but still cling to old lies. The spiritual law is clear. The treasure cannot be possessed until you have bought the field, and the field is bought by renouncing what no longer serves. The price to pay is not suffering. It is not sacrifice in the traditional religious sense. The price is the surrender of false ideas, the voluntary abandonment of every thought not aligned with truth. Selling all that you have means letting go of identification with the ego, with personal history, with a limited vision of self. It is not renouncing what is good, but what is useless. It is not impoverishing oneself, but purifying oneself. And whoever does this does it joyfully, the parable says, not as one who loses, but as one who invests, because they know what they are acquiring. This parable reveals that the kingdom of heaven is not a place, but a state of consciousness. It is not in the future, nor in another dimension. It is hidden within you, waiting to be revealed. It is not for a few, nor does it require intermediaries. It only requires willingness, discipline, and a true desire for transformation. And when it is found, everything changes, because this is not just any treasure. It is not a collection of external things. It is the revelation of your divine nature, your identity as a child of God, your unity with the principle. It is the awakening to what has always been within you. Many seek outside what they already possess within. They look for approval, security, meaning, direction, and all of that is in the treasure. But they will not find it while clinging to the surface of the field. They want the field to bear fruit without having dug it, and until they dig, they will continue saying, "My life is a desert." Truth does not reveal itself to the superficial mind. It only reveals itself to those willing to dig, to those who dare to break old patterns, release the unnecessary, and commit to inner discovery. Jesus did not say that the man bought the treasure. He said he bought the field. The treasure cannot be bought. It has no price. It is free because it is yours by right. What is acquired is mastery over the terrain, that is, mastery over the mind. No one can give you the treasure, but you can train your mind to unearth it. That is the spiritual task. And this task begins with a firm decision. Stop seeking outside and begin working within. If you read this today with an open heart, it is because you have already glimpsed the treasure, perhaps for an instant, perhaps in a moment of silence or amid pain, perhaps in a spontaneous prayer or a sudden intuition. Do not let it escape. Do not forget it. Do not despise it. Return to it. Hide it if necessary, but consecrate yourself to it. And sell whatever you must sell: old grudges, useless theories, convenient excuses, victimhood, inherited fears, mental pride. Because when you buy the field, the treasure will be yours forever, not by merit, but by truth. The latent potential within you is infinite. Everything you need to live in harmony, prosperity, and fulfillment is already inside you. The Christ within does not need to be formed. It only needs to be recognized. You do not have to create it, you only have to reveal it. And the tool for that revelation is your daily decision to think from truth, act from love, and live from principle. You have found the treasure. Now it is your responsibility to buy the field. The kingdom is within you. Let us dig. Chapter 4, The Pearl of Great Price, the True Identity of the Self. Human life begins wrapped in ignorance. Most people are born, grow up, and die without ever truly understanding who they are. They identify with their name, their history, their body, their emotions, their wounds, their achievements, their mistakes. They see themselves as someone who struggles, someone who suffers, someone who is merely trying to survive. And in that process of mistaken self-image, they live alienated from their spiritual origin, disconnected from their divine purpose, unaware of their inner power. This widespread condition is the root of most of humanity's suffering. Because when a human being forgets who they live as what they are not. And all suffering arises from that lie. Jesus knew this. That is why he repeatedly spoke of the kingdom of God, not as a future promise, but as a present, hidden, intimate, living reality. And to explain the importance of discovering this true identity, he taught the parable of the pearl of great price. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking fine pearls, and having found one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Matthew 13:45-46. At first glance, this parable seems to echo the parable of the hidden treasure. Both involve discovery, renunciation, and acquisition. But there is a vital difference. In the treasure parable, the discovery is accidental, unexpected. In the pearl parable, there is a conscious, deliberate search. The protagonist is a merchant, someone who has dedicated their life to seeking what is valuable. They are not just anyone, they are a seeker, and that makes all the difference. The pearl represents the true identity of the self, the Christ within, the I am presence, that which does not change, does not age, does not suffer, and does not depend on the opinion of others or on external circumstances. Your eternal, complete, divine, perfect self is not a part of you. It is your essence, your real identity. Not as a theological concept, but as an inner experience. It is the consciousness of unity with God, attained not through merit or study, but through spiritual realization. The merchant searches for pearls, that is, he seeks value, and he has found many. Perhaps he has studied doctrines, explored philosophies, practiced methods, walked paths, acquired partial wisdom, had moments of clarity. But one day he finds a pearl unlike any other, a pearl that is not another idea, not another technique, not another passing emotion. It is truth itself. It is the revelation of the self. And then he realizes that nothing else holds the same value, that all the pearls he possessed were mere reflections, not the light. And so he decides to sell everything and keep that single pearl. This decision does not refer to renouncing material possessions. It is not about physical poverty. It is about ceasing to identify with what you are not. It means no longer saying, I am my body, I am my history, I am my diagnosis, I am my failures, I am what others think of me. It is abandoning the false identity. It is ceasing to build from the ego in order to begin living from the Christ. This is the greatest possible renunciation and, at the same time, the most glorious acquisition. The true identity of the self is not constructed. It is recognized. It is not fabricated. It is revealed. It has been within you from the beginning, but it has been covered by layers and layers of limiting beliefs, family conditioning, distorted religious ideas, emotional traumas, and mental habits. All of this forms a crust around your consciousness that prevents you from seeing the pearl you have always been. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God, he spoke of this pearl. When he said, I and the Father are one, he spoke from this pearl. When he taught to pray in secret, to forgive unconditionally, to look upon the enemy with love, he did so from this identity. Living from the Christ within means understanding that you are not a victim of your past, nor a lost creature in an indifferent universe. It means that you are an extension of love, a living manifestation of the principle, a conscious focus of creative power. And this understanding transforms not only your behavior, but your destiny, because your actions cease to be mere attempts at survival and begin to be expressions of an unshakable inner truth. Now, why do so few achieve this realization? Because they are not willing to sell what they have. They want the pearl, but they do not want to let go of the other pearls, the pearl of spiritual pride, the pearl of cultivated guilt, the pearl of subtle fear, the pearl of the need for recognition, the pearl of constant comparison. These are the small pearls with which the ego trades. And as long as you value them, you will not see the radiance of the true one. You cannot have both. You either live from the ego or from the Christ. The parable is clear. The merchant sold all that he had and bought the pearl, and he bought it with joy, certainty, and conviction. Because upon finding that pearl, existential doubts vanish, the endless search ceases and the heart settles. The soul that has seen its true identity needs no one's approval, does not compete, does not justify. It knows who it is, and from that certainty it lives, loves, serves, creates, and transforms. You are that pearl. You will not become it. You already are it. You just need to remember. All your suffering has been caused by forgetting who you are, by identifying with what changes, what hurts, what ages, what dies. But there is a part of you that never was born and will never die, a spark that is one with the divine fire, a consciousness that cannot be harmed by anything or anyone. That is your true identity. That is the pearl, and it is within you right now. You need no more theories, no more proofs. You need to look inward with courage. You need to release your masks, your roles, your complaints, your titles, your wounds. You need to stop being what you think you are in order to begin being. When you do this, you will need no one's approval. Your presence alone will speak, because the Christ is not preached. It radiates. The pearl is not displayed. It manifests. And that manifestation begins when you decide to buy the field and sell your other pearls, when you decide to stop living as one who seeks and begin to live as one who is found. No longer as one who begs, but as one who affirms. No longer as one who doubts, but as one who knows. Practical exercise. 2. Visualization of the mental treasure. Objective: to experience the inner perception of your true spiritual identity. Duration: 15 minutes daily for 7 consecutive days. Instructions: find silence. Sit in a place without interruptions. Breathe deeply and release all external thoughts. Close your eyes and say softly to your mind, "Silence, I am going inward." Visualize the field. Imagine a wide field covered with soil. Know that this field represents you, your mind, your consciousness, your inner world. Discover the pearl. Visualize your hands gently turning the soil, and as you dig, something bright begins to emerge. It is a luminous, vibrant, living pearl. As you hold it, feel absolute peace and total certainty. Know that this pearl is you, your true self. Declare mentally, "I am the pearl of great price. I am one with God. I am not my past, nor my history, nor my body. I am the living expression of the principle. I am the Christ in manifestation." Remain in silence. Do not try to do anything. Just feel. Allow this identity to fill you. Let it imprint in your subconscious. When ready, open your eyes and take a deep breath. Repeat this exercise daily, preferably in the morning before engaging with the world. This practice is not creative visualization. It is direct contact with your spiritual identity. Done with consistency and faith, something within you will change irreversibly. Now you know that you are more than you appear to be. Now you know that you do not need to search outside. Now you know that the pearl is you, and that knowing marks the beginning of a new life. Because one who discovers their true identity no longer walks through the world as a beggar. They walk as a bearer of light, as a child of God, as the Christ awakened. Chapter 5. The Prodigal Son, the cycle of deviation and return in consciousness. Every consciousness, without exception, goes through a cyclical process of departure and return, a pendulum movement between ignorance and wisdom, between apparent separation and inner reunification. This oscillation is not a tragedy, nor a sin, nor a punishment, but a deeply significant spiritual mechanism. It is the way the human soul awakens through contrast. By moving away from the source, it discovers its true need. By hitting rock bottom in illusion, it longs for truth. By believing it is free while separating itself, it discovers that true freedom comes only by returning to its principle. This universal experience of erring, losing oneself, and ultimately returning is vividly represented in one of Jesus' most powerful parables, the parable of the prodigal son. A man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that falls to me." And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and journeyed to a distant country, and there squandered his property in reckless living. Luke 15:11, 13. The parable continues with the collapse of the younger son, his humiliation working as a caretaker for pigs, a symbol of the lowest state of consciousness, his decision to return home, the loving reception of the father, and the complaint of the elder son regarding the generosity shown to the returning brother. Each of these elements carries profound mental meaning that must be examined. The younger son represents the part of our consciousness that chooses to experience separation. It is the mind that believes itself self-sufficient, that confuses freedom with isolation, that seeks to exercise personal will without spiritual guidance. It is the I want my share ego venturing into worldly experience without the support of principle. This is the stage of spiritual arrogance. Many pass through it after discovering a certain autonomy or material success. They believe they no longer need prayer, mental vigilance, or communion with God. They have received their inheritance, mind, life, free will, and they decide to use it without wisdom. In the parable, the Father does not oppose this. He grants the request. This is one of the most striking laws of free will. God does not prevent you from using your mental power as you wish. He does not punish, impose, or manipulate. You are allowed to go as far as you choose. And when you depart, He does not abandon you, but neither does He interfere. True love does not force. Principle does not compel. It only waits. The sun travels to a distant province. This represents the mind in a state of fragmentation, the consciousness that has moved away from the center. It has gone far, that is, it has shifted attention toward the external, the apparent, the sensory. It has forgotten its origin, broken its axis, and, as a result, begins to squander its wealth. What are these possessions? Mental faculties, vital energy, creative capacity, clarity, inner peace. Whoever lives disconnected from the Christ within inevitably wastes their spiritual inheritance. Then comes a great hunger. The metaphor is perfect. Sooner or later, the mind without principle experiences scarcity, not because God punishes, but because it has disconnected from the source. This hunger represents inner emptiness, chronic dissatisfaction, the compulsive pursuit of pleasures that never satisfy. It is the soul exhausted from living through the ego. And in that moment, when all has failed, when neither the world nor its promises provide relief, true awakening begins. The parable says that coming to himself, he said, "I will arise and go to my Father." This instant is crucial. It is the inner turn, the moment consciousness realizes it has lost itself. It is not moral remorse, but spiritual clarity. The son does not return out of punishment, but out of understanding. He has tested the illusory and recognized its emptiness. He has experienced separation and remembered that he belongs to unity. The return is intimate. There is no procession, no witnesses, only the soul and its decision. It is an inner path, a renunciation of pride, self-sufficiency, the illusory I. It is the journey home. And upon arrival, something occurs that transforms every human conception of God. The Father runs to meet him, embraces him, clothes him, restores him. He does not interrogate, reproach, or demand explanations. God does not punish error. He simply dissolves it when the soul returns. The Son does not need to explain his experiences. He only needs to accept being received. Here, a transcendental spiritual law is revealed. Conscious return to the principle is always honored with immediate restoration. There are no stages, no tests, no penances. The moment you recognize your error and decide to return to truth, that very truth clothes you with its power, peace, and original dignity. The ring, the robe, the sandals, the feast, all represent the recovery of full spiritual consciousness. The ring symbolizes mental authority, the robe, inner purity, the sandals, mastery over appearances, the feast, the celebration of the soul that has returned to its center. This is not decorative symbolism, it is an operative law. When the soul returns to the Christ within, what seemed lost begins to be restored. The elder son, for his part, represents the moralistic mind, the spiritual ego that believes it deserves more for having remained physically close, but has never truly understood the Father's love. It is the rigid consciousness that judges, compares, and demands external justice. Jesus includes this figure to warn that physical proximity alone does not suffice. Without spiritual understanding, one is still far. The elder son did not leave the field, but he never entered the Father's house. He never celebrated life, never felt like an heir, only an employee. That is why he complains, and that is why the Father answers him gently. "Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours." Both sons are us. Both processes occur in every soul. We all stray, we all return. Sometimes we complain like the elder, sometimes we feel lost like the younger. But the final message is clear. The Father is always ready to restore. The kingdom remains intact. It is not a place we lost, it is a state we forgot. And the return is always possible. Every time you choose to think from love rather than fear, it returns. Every time you choose to forgive rather than judge, it returns. Every time you affirm truth above appearance, it returns. No one has fallen too far, no one has failed too deeply, no one is excluded. The table is still set, the ring still waits. The robe is ready, and all you must do is return. Return to yourself, return to truth, return to the Christ within. The cycle is inevitable, but awakening can be today, because the moment you decide, you are already on your way. Chapter 6. The Good Samaritan, Love as the Practical Law of Right Thought. In the world of spiritual ideas, knowledge without action does not transform. Understanding without application is sterile, and right thought, if it is not translated into a way of life, remains unmanifested potential. Jesus knew this. That is why when a lawyer of the law asked him, "And who is my neighbor?" he did not respond with definitions, but with a story that reveals that love is not an occasional feeling, nor an emotional sympathy, nor indulgence. It is a practical law of right thought that manifests in concrete daily conduct. This story is the parable of the Good Samaritan. As recounted in Luke 10, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell among robbers, who stripped him, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to go down that road, and seeing him passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite came near the place, saw him, and passed by. But a Samaritan, traveling that way, came near him, and seeing him, was moved with compassion. The narrative continues, describing how the Samaritan stops, tends to the wounded man, carries him to an inn, and takes care of him. Jesus then asks, "Which of these three was a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" The lawyer replies, "The one who showed mercy." And Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." The mental structure of this parable is clear. The wounded man represents fallen, vulnerable, fragmented consciousness. The road from Jerusalem to Jericho symbolizes the progressive descent from the spiritual center into the world of illusion. The robbers are destructive thoughts that steal peace, faith, dignity, and purpose. They are ideas of guilt, hatred, abandonment, and failure, leaving the soul half dead, biologically alive but spiritually disconnected. Then appears the priest, followed by the Levite, figures of religious knowledge, dogma without compassion, theory without action. They see the wound, but do not touch it. They recognize the problem, but do not intervene. This is the state of mind that studies spiritual truths but does not apply them, that knows principles but does not transform life. It memorizes decrees but does not extend a hand. It observes pain, its own or another's, from a distance with judgment or excuses, and passes by. In contrast, the Samaritan, a member of a group despised by the Jews, represents the consciousness that does not seek theoretical justification, but acts from compassion. He stops, approaches, touches, heals, transports, invests time, energy, and resources in caring for another without calculation, conditions, or religiosity. This act is not merely a good deed. It is the manifestation of right thought, a thought that recognizes the unity of all living things. Whoever thinks correctly loves without distinction, and whoever loves in this way restores their own being. Jesus did not choose the Samaritan by chance. He knew his listeners would find it scandalous that a Samaritan, someone outside the religious system, would be the model of compassion. He was demonstrating that love does not belong to a caste, doctrine, or chosen group. Love is the direct expression of God in action, and therefore anyone who thinks from truth lives from love. Applied to your inner process, this parable shows that every day you encounter wounded thoughts. Parts of your consciousness lie bruised by past mistakes, critical voices, traumatic experiences, and often, like the priest and Levite, you pass by. You see your pain but do not tend it. You see your patterns but do not transform them. You read about forgiveness but do not forgive. You understand metaphysics but do not love. This omission is not neutral. It freezes spiritual growth. The practice of love as the law of right thought begins when you decide not to pass by. When you stop saying, "This does not concern me," or "I'll deal with it later." It begins when love is not an emotion, but an attitude, not a word, but a decision, not a refuge, but a guiding principle. In this context, love is recognizing that the other, yes, even the one who irritates you, whom you do not understand, who disturbs you, is part of you, and that by lifting them, you lift yourself. This parable also refers to how you treat the other thoughts inhabiting your mind, how you handle your emotions, how you speak to yourself, how you care for your inner wounds. The Samaritan neither ignores nor judges nor condemns. He knows that if the wounded man remains there, his own journey will be incomplete. Likewise, if you do not heal your fragmented aspects, your consciousness cannot reach fullness. The key to right thought is not in thinking nicely or repeating hopeful phrases. It is in using thought as an instrument of concrete love. Every time you see error, pain, or lack in yourself or another, and decide to respond with active compassion, you are applying the principle. You are living from Christ. You are following Jesus' command. Go and do likewise. Love is not theorized, it is enacted. It is lived when you are willing to stop, to get your hands metaphorically dirty if needed, to apply oil and wine, to commit to restoration of both the other and yourself. This is the parable that transforms spirituality into a path. Right thought without love is only theory. Love without right thought is mere emotion. But when they unite, true healing occurs. Remember, Jesus never asked if the wounded man deserved help. He did not inquire about his history, mistakes, or religion. The only thing that mattered was that he was wounded, and someone had the mind and heart to stop. That is the consciousness that manifests the kingdom. Practical exercise. 3. Redefining your path of return. Objective. Transform your perspective toward wounded aspects of your consciousness and practice love as an active law. Duration 4 consecutive days, 30 minutes daily. Instructions. Identify your inner wound. Spend 10 minutes writing without censorship. Which part of you feels hurt, abandoned, judged, or unheard? It can be an emotion, repetitive thought, or memory. Be honest. List your priests and Levites. Write the justifications, excuses, or mechanisms you have used to ignore this part of yourself. Examples. I've moved past it. It doesn't matter. I don't have time for this. Act as the Samaritan. Write a letter of love and restoration to that part of yourself. Not from pity, but from love. Use phrases like, now I see you, I value you, and I am willing to heal you. I will bring you to the inn, I will care for you. Practical offering. Each day do something concrete that represents care. It could be a mindful walk, a prayer, a pending conversation, or even forgiving yourself. It must be real, not symbolic. Daily affirmation. I am right thought in action. I am the love that heals my path. I am Christ lifting all that is wounded, and I will no longer pass by myself. This exercise redefines the path back to the center. It is not about seeking the kingdom in the sky, but manifesting it on the ground, because the kingdom begins when you stop passing by and decide to heal. You can do it now. You have already traveled half the path. You have sown, cleansed, discovered the treasure, and touched the pearl. You have understood the return. Now you know that love is not optional. It is the practical law that converts thought into kingdom. Prepare to learn how to manage that inner kingdom, because what has been revealed within you must now be cultivated with wisdom. Chapter 7. The Unfaithful Steward, Managing Ideas and Spiritual Responsibility. Thought creates all form, all experience, all visible condition in your life. Without exception, everything you experience today is the result of thoughts previously held, nurtured, and repeated in your mind. This law cannot be avoided or suspended. It is as constant as gravity. Yet while every human being is constantly using the power of thought, not everyone manages it consciously. Not everyone is responsible for what they think, for what they allow to dwell in their mind, or for what they nourish in their consciousness. Here we enter a deeper dimension of spiritual work, the management of ideas as an act of inner stewardship. Jesus taught this principle sharply in one of his most perplexing, and therefore most overlooked parables, the parable of the unfaithful steward, recounted in Luke 16. There was a rich man who had a steward, and the steward was accused before him of wasting his goods. The rich man called him and said, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward." The parable continues, showing how the steward, upon learning he will be dismissed, takes steps to gain the favor of his master's debtors, reducing their debts. At first glance, it seems an apology for human cunning. But Jesus concludes the story by saying, "The master commended the dishonest steward because he acted shrewdly, for the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the children of light." To understand this parable, we must see that the rich man represents higher mind, the principle, the inner Christ. The steward represents the conscious mind. the faculty that organizes, selects, interprets, and directs the ideas accepted by the subconscious. In other words, you are the steward. You have been given fertile ground, a creative consciousness, a powerful mind, and the charge to manage everything that enters it: thoughts, beliefs, emotions, words, habits. This is your true wealth. Yet the steward is accused of wasting the goods. What does this mean? That he has used his mind unconsciously, squandering thoughts, wasting mental energy on fears, judgments, jealousy, worries, comparisons. He has spent time repeating borrowed ideas, debating appearances, feeding beliefs of separation. Now he is called to give account, not as punishment, but as a wake-up call to consciousness. This parable is a call to awaken from the irresponsible use of the mind. Thinking is not a private or harmless act. It is constant sowing. Every thought generates a cause. Every cause produces an effect. If you do not guard your thoughts, you will live the consequences you do not want, without understanding their origin. The unfaithful steward symbolizes that inner neglect, thinking without direction, speaking without filter, imagining without awareness, acting without comprehension. When the steward learns he will be dismissed, he does not despair. He acts. He uses his shrewdness to change the conditions he himself helped create. Though Jesus presents him as dishonest, he holds him up as an example for his cleverness. Why? Because it represents the consciousness that, when faced with its own imbalance, does not remain paralyzed in guilt or resignation. It takes action, redirects, corrects, negotiates, seeks to restore order. Here lies a fundamental teaching. Mental error is not definitive as long as there is willingness to correct it. No thought is irreplaceable. No habit is indestructible. No inner structure cannot be redesigned. But this does not occur through general affirmations alone. It occurs when you become a conscious administrator of your mental field. Being a spiritual steward means knowing that every idea you accept or reject affects your experience, that every word you speak is an order to your subconscious, that every emotion you nourish is a sowing, that every reaction is a choice. You cannot control circumstances, but you can manage your consciousness. You cannot prevent a wrong idea from arising, but you can decide not to harbor it. That is stewardship. And it must extend to all areas. Thoughts about money, your body, relationships, the future, God, yourself. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What beliefs are you allowing to remain as if they were truths? How are you using the mental treasure entrusted to you? This parable asks you, are you wasting your goods? Are you feeding your mind with scraps or with noble ideas? Jesus says the children of this world are more shrewd than the children of light. It is a direct warning. Many who understand spiritual principles live with less charity, discipline, and effectiveness than those who, unaware of the kingdom, use their faculties with cleverness. How is this possible? Because understanding without practice becomes self-deception, and Jesus does not tolerate it. The Christ in you demands coherence. You cannot claim to know truth while thinking from fear. You cannot claim to know prosperity while declaring lack. You cannot claim to love God while hating your neighbor. Spiritual stewardship is coherence. It is mental integrity. There is also a teaching of redemption in this parable. The steward, though unfaithful, is not destroyed. He is given the opportunity to act. Consciousness can always redirect the course of its experience if it acts with determination. Jesus does not condemn him. He presents him as a model of quick action and conscious use of mental resources. Managing your thoughts does not mean repression. It means understanding that everything you think has an outcome in the world of form. If you think from anger, you sow violence. If you think from compassion, you sow harmony. If you think from certainty, you sow results. Prayer, affirmation, and visualization are not empty rituals. They are tools of spiritual stewardship, and you are responsible for using them correctly. Just as the steward was called to give account, so will you, not by an external deity, but by the very law of your mind. Consequences are inevitable. But if you learn to govern yourself, to take control of your inner field, to guard your language, emotions, and deepest thoughts, then it will be said to you, you have been faithful in little. Over much I will set you. Everything that is yet to come in your life depends on how you manage what you already have, your attention, your word, your faith. This is true stewardship. This is practical spirituality. This is the teaching of Christ. In the coming chapters, we will see how this spiritual administration produces visible fruits, how disciplined sowing leads to multiplication, and how little can be transformed into abundance. But first, pause. Review your inner accounts. Give an account of your stewardship, and if there is something to correct, do it now, because the kingdom is in your hands, and you are its administrator. Chapter 8. The Workers in the Vineyard. Time, Justice, and Mental Equivalence. One of the greatest sources of frustration for the soul on the path of awakening is the mistaken idea of justice. For centuries, it has been taught that God rewards some and punishes others, that those who have done more deserve more, and that divine will follows a human logic of merits, effort, and visible rewards. But the principle does not operate according to the logic of the world. Its law is perfect, yet it is not measured by the amount of work nor by seniority on the path. It is measured by vibratory correspondence. It manifests through mental equivalence. This truth is so profound that Jesus had to explain it with a parable that scandalizes every legalistic mind. The parable of the workers in the vineyard, found in Matthew 20. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard, and having agreed with the workers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. Going out about the 3rd hour, he saw others standing idle, and he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you." And he went out again about the 6th and the 9th hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and he said to them, "Why have you been standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you shall receive." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, "Call the laborers, and pay them their wages, beginning with the last to the first." And when those hired about the 11th hour came, each received a denarius. And when those hired first came, they supposed they would receive more, but each also received a denarius. And when they received it, they murmured against the landowner, saying, "These last have worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "Friend, I do you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go. I choose to give to this last as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I wish with what belongs to me, or is your eye envious because I am generous?" The message is direct and profound. The kingdom does not operate by physical effort or accumulated merit. It functions by the charity of thought in the present. It does not matter how long you have been on the spiritual path. It does not matter how many books you have read, how many prayers you have offered, or how many experiences you have lived. If your consciousness in this moment resonates in harmony with the truth, you are ready to receive. The principle does not measure time, it measures mental equivalence. This may confuse many, especially those who have made their spirituality a system of accounting. Those who say, "I have worked so hard on myself. Why does what I ask not manifest?" If their complaint carries comparison, judgment, or demand, then there is no vibratory equivalence with the good they seek. The kingdom responds not to past effort, but to the quality of consciousness attained now. Each worker represents a type of consciousness. Those hired at dawn symbolize souls that entered the spiritual path early, dedicating years to study and practice. Those hired at the 11th hour represent those who arrive without preparation but with pure faith, sincere desire, and full surrender in the present, and therefore receive the same, because they are aligned. The mistake is believing that time gives entitlement. Principle responds not to time, but to faith. The denarius symbolizes manifestation, the fruit, the inner harvest. All receive it because all were, in the end, aligned with the call. It does not matter if your awakening was early or late, whether you arrived by tradition or by crisis, whether you have years on the path or have just begun. What matters is, are you working now? Are you mentally active? Are you in the vineyard, that is, in the consciousness of unity? Here the human concept of justice dissolves. There is no injustice in the kingdom. There is law, a law that gives to each not what they have done, but what they are being. Not what they think they deserve, but what they mentally accept as their own. This is why Jesus says, "So the last will be first and the first last," because everything is decided in the present moment of consciousness. The one who believes they have worked much but now complains disconnects. The one who arrives without a past but with living faith connects. This transforms your understanding of time. You no longer need years to manifest. You do not require long processes if your acceptance is total, nor must you lament lost years. What you did not do before is irrelevant. If today you think correctly, today you can begin to see fruits. Mental equivalence is immediate, not cumulative. It is resonance. Like a radio capturing a frequency, it does not matter how many times before you turned the dial incorrectly. If today you tune it correctly, today you hear the music. This is why daily mental work is the true contract with the principle. No effort is wasted. No day is useless. Each time you pray with faith, correct a thought, or choose love over judgment, you are working in the vineyard and your payment is guaranteed. Manifestation is ensured, but it does not depend on dates or chronological order. It depends on the mental equivalence you maintain here and now. Jesus presents the landowner as the absolute owner of his goods and tells the worker, "Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with what is mine?" This is a warning to the mind that seeks to control the principle, impose conditions, or dictate methods. Good cannot be manipulated. It can only be accepted. And to accept it, you must be in harmony with it. That harmony is non-negotiable. It is achieved through mental alignment with truth. There are no favorites, no divine delays, only correspondence. This parable dismantles the belief in a God who keeps accounts, watches, and distributes, and instead reveals a principle that responds with absolute precision to the quality of thought. You're not waiting for God to reward you. You're waiting to be at the mental level that allows it, and you can reach it as soon as you choose. Practical exercise 4. Your daily mental work. Objective: train consciousness in continuous alignment with the law of good, without judgment or comparison. Duration: 7 consecutive days, 20 minutes daily. Instructions: start of the day, mental tuning, 5 minutes. Sit in silence. Repeat mentally, "Today I work in the vineyard of truth. I do not compete. I do not compare. I align. Principle acts through my now." During the day, observation of judgment. Each time a thought of comparison, complaint, or urgency arises, pause and say quietly, "I am in the vineyard. My payment is secure." Do not analyze, just correct and continue. Evening record equivalences, 10 minutes. Write 3 ideas you held during the day and their possible corresponding manifestations. Example thought: I am grateful for all I have. Manifestation: today I felt peace without cause. Example thought: this never improves. Manifestation: I encountered unexpected conflict. Repeat nightly. Over time, you will see all is connected. Closing affirmation. Before sleeping, repeat 3 times. What I think now determines my harvest. I work joyfully in the mental vineyard. Good belongs to me by law. This exercise makes you conscious of inner work as the true generator of results. It frees you from time, anchoring you in equivalence. It releases you from past and future, because the kingdom is now. You have learned to recognize the mind as a field, as a treasure, as a path, as stewardship. Now you know the law of the kingdom is vibratory, not chronological. What you receive depends not on what you have done, but on what you are being. Mental work is the only sowing that guarantees a harvest. Prepare, then, to learn how that harvest multiplies, because if you manage little well, much will manifest by law. Chapter 9. The 10 Virgins. Vigilance of attention and the power of persistent thought. On the spiritual path, it is not enough to start well. It is not sufficient to have good intentions, occasional clarity, or moments of enthusiastic faith. Truth does not respond to impulses or sporadic bursts of illumination. It responds to persistent thought, continuous vigilance, and the sustained charity of the mind. Power does not manifest by accident or luck. It manifests where there is steady attention, focused thought, and constant watchfulness. This is the essential teaching of the parable of the 10 virgins, found in Matthew 25:1. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins, who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. The foolish took their lamps, but took no oil with them. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. While the bridegroom delayed, they all slumbered and slept. At midnight there was a cry, "Behold, the bridegroom is coming." Then all the virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, "No, lest there be not enough for us and you. Go rather to those who sell, and buy for yourselves." While they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. This parable does not speak of literal weddings, external morality, or future punishment. It speaks of consciousness in a state of vigilance. The virgins represent mental faculties, the lamps attention, the oil, the power of persistent thought, and the bridegroom, the manifestation of the inner Christ, the spiritual realization that comes to those mentally prepared to receive it. All 10 virgins begin equally. All carry lamps, all share the same goal, all are on the same path. This shows that there are no spiritual privileges. Every human being possesses mental faculties, intuition, intelligence, willpower, imagination, discernment. But not all nourish them, not all sustain them, not all put oil into them. Here emerges the difference, not in intention, but in persistence. The oil represents the accumulated substance of correct thoughts, purified emotions, consistent prayers, and daily vigilance. It is the inner reserve cultivated silently, without display, without urgency, without expecting immediate results. Just as oil forms drop by drop, mental power is built thought by thought, day by day. There is no other way. Those who have not built this accumulation find, when the moment of manifestation arrives, that they are internally unprepared. The foolish virgins were not bad. They were simply inconsistent. They represent those who start with enthusiasm, but do not sustain their mental work, who are inspired but undisciplined, who pray when in need but not in calm, who study truth but do not practice it, who believe but get distracted, who awaken but fall asleep again. When the bridegroom arrives, the opportunity, the signal, the moment of realization, they are mentally weak, without oil, without substance. The bridegroom's arrival at midnight signifies that spiritual manifestation does not come according to the ego schedule. It does not obey clocks, plans, or forecasts. It comes when consciousness is ripe. And if the mind is unprepared, if it has not been vigilant, if it has not accumulated sufficient spiritual energy, the opportunity passes unutilized, not because God punishes, but because the inner door is not ready to open. The foolish virgins ask the wise for oil, but they are told, "No, lest there be not enough for us and you. Go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves." Here a strict law is revealed. Spiritual energy cannot be transferred by sympathy or compassion. Each soul must build its own vibratory field. No one can pray for you what you are unwilling to sustain yourself. No one can believe for you what you have not united with your own emotions. No one can give to you what you have not cultivated in your inner thought. And when they finally return with oil, the door is closed. Not out of cruelty, but by law. The door represents the opportunity aligned with the present moment. If you are unprepared, it simply closes. There will be other doors, but that one has passed. This is why Jesus concludes the parable firmly. "Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour." To watch does not mean to be tense. It means to be present, conscious, aligned. It means to think correctly, consistently, not once a week, not only when there is trouble, but every day, at every moment. To watch is to correct thought whenever it deviates. It is not allowing your lamp to run out of oil. It is maintaining sufficient internal reserves for when manifestation arrives. Momentary faith is not enough. Isolated enthusiasm is not enough. Theoretical understanding is not enough. Only persistent thought creates stable consciousness. Only daily prayer creates an illuminated mind. Only the constant practice of love, forgiveness, and affirmation builds the vibratory field capable of sustaining good, and that field cannot be improvised. It is cultivated. This parable reminds you that you do not know when the next door will open. You do not know when your opportunity will arrive, but you do know that the law never fails, and your only task is to be ready, to have oil, to have light, to have vigilance. If it arrives and you are prepared, you will enter, not by merit, but by vibratory correspondence. The kingdom does not reward, it recognizes. It does not punish, it excludes what is unaligned. Do not live waiting for external signs. Do not place your faith in dates, prophecies, or circumstances. Place it in your preparation, in your inner discipline, in your mental vigilance. The Christ will come to your consciousness, but will enter only if he finds lamp and oil. In the coming chapters, You will understand how this vigilance allows the multiplication of received talents, and how the law of spiritual growth depends more on faithfulness in small things than on brilliance in the visible. What determines your progress is not how much you know, but how attentive you are. If you decide to live watchfully, thinking correctly, nurturing your lamp, you will have nothing to fear. Your light will not go out, and when the bridegroom comes, your consciousness will be ready, and you will enter because you will be one with the light. Chapter 10. The foolish rich man, the illusion of matter, the reality of spirit. Human thought, when not educated in truth, tends to build its security upon what is visible. It believes that the more it accumulates, the more protected it is. It associates abundance with material possession and happiness with external achievements. It measures its value by numbers, properties, objects, appearances. Yet in this very act, it encloses itself in an invisible prison, for all that is visible is transient. Everything material changes by its nature. Matter is not the enemy of spirit, but neither is it its source. The error is not in having things, but in believing that things are the source of well-being. Jesus, foreseeing this common self-deception, told the parable of the foolish rich man, Luke 12:16-21. The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do, for I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said, "I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself, and is not rich toward God." This man was not wicked, nor violent, nor unjust, but he was called a fool. Why? Because he lived under the illusion that his security depended on what he had, not on what he was. He had worked, yes, he had harvested, yes, but his mind was centered on having, not being. His soul was nourished not by truth, but by external provisions. And at the least expected moment, he was reminded that the soul is not property, but purpose. Life is not to be lived by accumulation, but by expression. This parable dismantles worldly thinking and reveals an inescapable spiritual law. Anything you consider your source, if it is not God, will ultimately enslave you. The visible has no power in itself. Matter is not causative, it is effect. What you see in your bank account, in your home, in your body, in your surroundings, is a reflection, and a reflection cannot sustain you. It can only show your inner state. When the rich man speaks to his soul, he says, "Soul, you have many goods stored. Rejoice." But the soul is not fed by wheat. It is not sustained by numbers, contracts, or physical guarantees. The soul is spiritual. It can only be nourished by love, truth, peace, beauty, and purpose. If it is not given these, even if your barns are full, you will live with a sense of emptiness, restlessness, and fragility, because your security is placed in the unstable. The call of the principle is clear. Fool, tonight your soul is required of you. This is not a threat or a punishment. It is a powerful metaphor. Life will demand that you account for who you are, not for what you possess. Existence will ask for your level of consciousness, not your material inheritance. There will come a moment, perhaps illness, loss, or crisis, when the external will no longer sustain you. If you are not rich toward God, meaning if you do not have an inner reserve of faith, clarity, spiritual identity, and deep understanding, you will feel that you have nothing. The teaching is not a praise of poverty, but a call to transcend identification with the external. You may have riches and use them for good. You may live comfortably and be a channel for the principle. But if your thought is based on possession rather than the expression of being, you will live bound by fear, fear of loss, fear of insufficiency, and fear is the greatest thief of peace. When Jesus says, "So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God," he speaks of a mental choice. You can choose to build a rich consciousness or a rich appearance. You can choose to invest in your soul or only in your possessions. You can choose to see God as your sole source, or see money, relationships, or status as your providers. But every choice creates a reality, and only one leads to freedom. The foolish rich man did not understand that the universe is mental, that the true granary is the subconscious, and that the ideas you plant there will sustain your experience. If you deposit only anxiety, need, greed, or dependence, that is what you will harvest. But if you plant certainty, gratitude, generosity, vision, and faith, then even if the external changes, your provision will not be interrupted. Here lies the great truth. Everything you need is within you, not in the bank, not in your boss, inheritance, or the market, but in your consciousness. If you elevate your consciousness, everything else will reorganize. If you expand your understanding of the principle as source, all external things will be added, not as reward, but as consequence. Thus, it is not about renouncing material things, but about remembering that matter is an instrument, not a master. Your soul cannot speak with your possessions. The kingdom does not enter by accumulation, but by inner expansion. Abundance is not how much you have, but how aware you are of what you already are. Practical exercise. 5. Inventory of belief systems. Objective: identify and dismantle limiting beliefs associated with matter, security, and true provision. Duration: 3 consecutive days, 30 minutes daily. Instructions on inventory: write honestly. What external things make me feel secure? What would I lose if I lost my job, house, or image? What phrases did I hear in childhood about money, success, or poverty? What is my current belief about what sustains me? Classify beliefs. Divide your list into 2 columns: beliefs based on matter, beliefs based on spirit. Transform. Select 3 limiting beliefs. For example, money is scarce. I need to secure myself before helping others. If I have no savings, I am unprotected. Transform them into statements of truth. Good is inexhaustible. I am a constant channel of provision. God is my source here and now. Daily declaration. For 10 minutes each day, repeat, I am rich toward God. All I need flows to me from my enlightened consciousness. Nothing external defines me. All that is real is within me. Daily practice. Whenever you feel worried about the external, mentally repeat, Spirit is my only source. I am secure. Act from that certainty, even in small ways. Share something. Release a fear. Make a decision from trust. This exercise begins to restructure your belief system, not through effort, but through understanding. When you realize that all visible things are merely a reflection of what you sustain in your mind, you stop fearing and begin to live with inner wealth, freedom, and active faith. In the next chapter, you will discover how that inner wealth becomes seed, and how the multiplication of good does not depend on how much you have, but on how you think, act, and give. The Spirit always rewards the faithful steward. Chapter 11, The Unforgiving Servant. Forgiveness as an instrument of mental liberation. The human mind that does not forgive remains trapped in time. It lives enslaved by a moment of the past, repeating it, feeding it, sustaining it. It believes that to protect itself is to remember the harm, that to enact justice is to hold on to resentment, that memory of pain is a form of control. But it does not understand that until it releases that memory, it cannot move forward. Forgiveness is not a favor you do for another. It is the only means you have to free yourself from the weight you yourself chose to carry. Jesus taught this truth radically through the parable of the unforgiving servant, recorded in Matthew 18:21-35. The context is revealing. Peter asks how many times one must forgive, and generously suggests up to 7 times. Jesus replies not 7 times but 70 times 7, and then tells a story that dismantles any human logic about justice. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. And when he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he could not pay, the master ordered him to be sold with his wife, children, and all that he had to repay. Then the servant fell on his knees, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay you all. And the master, moved with compassion, released him and forgave the debt. But that servant, going out, found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and he seized him, saying, Pay what you owe. The rest is known. The servant does not forgive, despite having been forgiven. The king finds out and severely reprimands him, revoking the forgiveness he had granted. The lesson is emphatic. So also will my heavenly Father do to you, if you do not forgive from your heart each one his brother. This parable is not a moral tale. It is a precise depiction of how the mind functions. The king represents the law of the principle that responds to your inner state. The indebted servant represents each of us when we carry guilt, mistakes, resentments, omissions. The debt of 10,000 talents symbolizes all the wrong thoughts we have held, years of judgment, fear, rejection, mental attack. The release represents the opportunity life always offers, a new beginning, the grace that is activated when you choose to think correctly again. But the decisive moment comes afterward. That same servant who had been freed becomes a jailer. He demands, pressures, clings to grievance. The other owed him only 100 denarii, a trivial amount compared to what he himself had been forgiven. This perfectly depicts the unregenerated mind. It wants to be freed but is unwilling to free. It asks for understanding but does not offer compassion. It cries out for love but denies forgiveness, and thus falls back into prison, not because God punishes, but because it recreates the prison from its own inner stance. Any mind that does not forgive becomes its own executioner. It feeds the past, sustains the other mentally as guilty, and in doing so binds itself to that energy. It cannot pray with power. It cannot affirm with conviction. It cannot visualize clearly, because resentment is a mental cloud that interferes with all creative thought. It is a distortion of truth, and while present, it blocks the Spirit's action in you. Jesus taught that prayer must begin with forgiveness. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Not because God requires conditions, but because a mind that does not release cannot receive. A vessel full of bitterness cannot be filled with joy. A channel blocked by judgment cannot transmit the energy of good. Forgiveness is not sentimentality nor weakness. It is spiritual intelligence. It is an act of mental purification, a cleansing of consciousness, and must be done without expecting any reaction from the other. The servant did not consult his fellow debtor, he simply attacked him. Likewise, those who do not forgive seek to punish, even if only mentally. But forgiveness does not require external recognition, reconciliation, or acknowledgement. It requires an inner decision. You forgive to release, to free yourself, to stop being your own jailer. Many resist because they believe that to forgive is to justify harm, but it is not. Forgiveness is not denying what happened. It is choosing not to continue feeding it with your mental energy. It is no longer projecting your creative power into the past. It is saying, this happened, but I choose to think from spirit now. And by doing so, you cleanse your vibrational field, recover your peace, and become capable of receiving all that the kingdom has prepared for you. In the parable, the servant was forgiven without conditions. He paid nothing, earned nothing. He simply asked. Likewise, the law of the principle does not demand that you pay with suffering. It only requires that you think correctly. And to think correctly is to think from love, humility, and the understanding that the other is, like you, a soul in process, a divine spark, also remembering who they are. If you want to advance, you must release. If you want to heal, you must free. If you want to manifest, you must forgive. There is no shortcut, because forgiveness is not just a virtue, it is a law. And until it is fulfilled, all else is distorted. But the moment you practice it, a new door opens, for forgiveness is the access code to your next level of consciousness. Chapter 12, The Wedding Banquet. Inner preparation and mental response to the divine call. In the teaching of Christ, spiritual experience is not a theory, nor a promise for after death. It is a present, concrete, immediate experience. It is not about waiting for God to act, but about being ready to receive His presence when it manifests. This readiness is neither emotional nor intellectual. It is sustained inner preparation, an active mental response, a state of receptive, affirmative, clear, and open consciousness. Now, Jesus taught this forcefully in the parable of the wedding banquet, found in Matthew 22, 1:14. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son. He sent his servants to call those invited to the feast, but they would not come. Again he sent other servants, saying, Tell those invited, Behold, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business. The story continues with the king's anger at their disregard and the sending of servants to invite anyone they found. The hall fills, yet the king sees one without a wedding garment and casts him out. Jesus concludes, "For many are called, but few are chosen." This parable, often misinterpreted as a fearful warning, is in reality a clear exposition of the principle of mental response. The kingdom is always available. The feast is prepared. The banquet represents spiritual abundance, fulfillment, inner plenitude, conscious union with the inner Christ. Yet not all are willing to enter, not because the king or God closes the door, but because the human mind is occupied, distracted, or not properly dressed. The first great teaching is that all human beings are invited. No one is excluded because of origin, condition, history, or ability. The call is universal. Come. This means that the good is ready to manifest in your life. Peace, provision, love, guidance, health. You do not need to wait to become more spiritual or more deserving. You only need to be willing to enter. But many, Jesus says, did not want to come. Here there is no punishment, only voluntary refusal. A mind identified with the urgency of the world, with the ego, with external demands, goes to its farm, to its business. It does not respond. The second teaching is even deeper. When the hall was filled with the new invitees, those without prior invitation, one was found without a wedding garment. What does this mean? That although called and accepted, he did not prepare internally for the experience. He entered the kingdom, but had not transformed his consciousness. He lacked the garment, which here represents proper thinking, correct vibration, a mental disposition in alignment with the kingdom. In metaphysical terms, this scene shows that it is not enough to repeat affirmations, attend spiritual meetings, or read metaphysical books. It is not enough to be called. What determines your permanence at the banquet is the quality of your thought, your inner state, your alignment. You may enter, yes, but if you bring thoughts of judgment, fear, separation, or spiritual arrogance, you will remove yourself from the banquet even while sitting there. The wedding garment is your mentality, your way of thinking, feeling, and relating to others. It is how you position yourself before the principle. It is your inner reverence, your mental integrity, your respect for the spiritual energy at work. It is not a religious obligation, it is a law of vibrational correspondence. The kingdom does not impose. It manifests where there is harmony. Many are called, indeed all, but not all respond. And of those who respond, not all prepare. This is Jesus' loving warning. Spiritual manifestation is open, but preparation is personal. No one can dress your consciousness for you. No one can do your inner work. No one can respond in your place. God has invited you to the banquet, but you must appear clothed in truth. Inner preparation is not asceticism nor effort. It is sustained attention, self-mastery, purification of thought, emotional honesty, a living relationship with the Christ within. A relationship expressed in decisions, attitudes, thoughts, and daily choices. There is no automatic entry into the kingdom. There is alignment, and alignment is reflected in the way you think. This parable also teaches that good is inexhaustible, that the feast continues even if some do not respond, that what others reject can be received by you if you are willing, and that there is no scarcity in the kingdom, only lack of receptivity. Do not complain about what others do not do. Do not look at how many entered. Look at whether you are ready, thinking with gratitude, faith, and coherence. The only door that opens the banquet is in your mind. Practical exercise. 6. Affirmative prayer of reconciliation. Objective: to consciously enter the mental preparation that allows you to receive and sustain spiritual good. Duration: 7 days, 20 minutes daily. Instructions: create your inner space. Each morning before speaking to anyone, sit in silence. Imagine a great illuminated hall. Visualize a generous table, an atmosphere of peace. You are invited, alone, entirely present. Recite this affirmative prayer. I am one with the Christ who calls me. The banquet of good is prepared for me. I release all resistance, all distraction, all hurry. I have seen my consciousness with truth. I am ready. I enter now. During the day, whenever something disturbs your peace, repeat mentally, I am at the banquet. Nothing external separates me. My preparation is my thought. Evening reflection. Briefly write how you responded to the call that day. Where were you unprepared? What thought was your garment? Where did you exclude Christ through distraction or judgment? Daily closing affirmation. I am ready, I enter, I remain. This exercise prepares you not for something external, but to receive internally what is already yours. It connects you to the law and aligns your consciousness with the kingdom. The only thing that separates you from good is a mind not dressed for the occasion. In the next and final chapter, you will understand how, having entered the banquet, the soul is now ready to multiply what it has received, become a sower of good, and live in expansion. Truth does not end in reception, it begins in expression, and you are the channel. Chapter 13, The Dragnet, the final selection of thoughts in the awakened mind. Every spiritual teaching inevitably culminates in a choice. Not a superficial or circumstantial choice, but a profound, permanent, structural decision. Which thoughts will you populate your consciousness with from now on? Which ideas will you allow to dwell in your mind? What mental vibration will you sustain when you are no longer learning but living? This final discernment is the culminating act of all true metaphysical practice, because an awakened mind can no longer permit itself to think in just any way. Once you have seen the kingdom, you cannot live as if it does not exist. Jesus illustrated this decisive moment with one of his briefest and least explored parables, the parable of the dragnet, found in Matthew 13:47-50. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was cast into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it to shore, sat down, and collected the good into baskets, but threw away the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the evil from the righteous. To understand it in a metaphysical key, the symbols must be interpreted with precision. The sea represents human consciousness. It is no coincidence that in Scripture, the sea is always associated with the mental world in its dynamic, changing, deep, and often chaotic state. It is the mind with all its layers, conscious ideas, emotions, memories, habits, and subconscious associations. It is here that the net is cast. The net is the action of the principle within the awakened consciousness. It is not an external net. It is the spiritual intelligence that, once activated in you, begins to gather all the ideas with which you have lived, the thoughts you have accepted, the beliefs you have held, the judgments you have entertained. It is the inevitable process of the soul's maturation. There comes a time when your entire thought system is brought into the light of truth. Nothing remains hidden. Everything is reviewed. Everything is made manifest to be classified. And then comes the key act, sitting at the shore and selecting. This shore is not a geographical place. It is the point of consciousness where you decide to live from your spiritual identity. From there, you can examine what you have fished, what you have believed, affirmed, imagined, and sustained, and separate what is useful from what is illusory. The good fish represents every true idea, every belief in harmony with the law of good, every emotion that vibrates in unity, love, forgiveness, and gratitude. The bad fish represents the opposite, ideas of fear, separation, scarcity, judgment, guilt, and self-denial. What matters here is not how you acquired these thoughts, how many years you have sustained them, or from whom you learned them. What matters is, will you keep them, or will you release them? The net has already been drawn in. You have seen, you know, you can no longer feign ignorance. You are at the shore. You are awake, and now it is your responsibility to choose. You cannot continue affirming truth while harboring thoughts of failure. You cannot continue praying for peace while nurturing resentments. You cannot remain divided. The error of many spiritual seekers is to believe that awakening is the end of the path, but it is not. Awakening is the beginning of responsibility. When you did not know, you lived by inertia. But now that you know, you must discern every thought, not out of morality, but according to law. Every idea you accept becomes a cause, and each cause generates an effect. If you do not perform this final act of selection, you will live contradicting your own truth, generating confusion, stagnation, and often unnecessary suffering. The parable says the angels separate the good from the bad. Metaphysically, the angels represent the higher forces within your own mind already at work in you. They are your elevated faculties, intuition, wisdom, spiritual discernment, that act when you reach the appropriate level of consciousness. But these faculties require your consent. You decide which thoughts to keep. You decide which ideas you give shelter. You decide whether to live from Christ or from ego. This act of selection is not emotional. It is structural. It is the moment you take responsibility for the content of your mind. You can no longer blame your childhood, society, the economy, your relationships, or even life itself. because you know that all you experience is a reflection of what you have mentally accepted as true. Your spiritual work now consists of vigilance, not out of fear, but with clarity. Not to punish yourself for wrong thoughts, but to ensure you no longer harbor them. Every day is a net, every night a shore, every thought a fish. You are the conscious fisher, you are not at the mercy of the waves. You are not a victim of your mind, you are its administrator. Your task is simple, though rigorous. Accept only that which is in harmony with your spiritual truth. Everything else must be discarded, not with anger, not with violence, but with loving determination. This final selection is the threshold of a new life. Once your mental field is cleared, what manifests will inevitably be harmonious. Not because God rewards you, but because the law encounters no resistance. Your affirmations work, your prayers rise, your words are powerful. Your environment responds because you are in coherence, because you are feeding only true thoughts. The sea of your mind, though still deep and dynamic, is no longer chaos, but an instrument of the spirit. This is the culmination of metaphysical work, a conscious, clean, sustained mind, not perfect but directed, not infallible but awake, not rigid but orderly. A mind redeemed by the inner Christ and now a channel for the kingdom. Final reflection. The net has been drawn in. You are at the shore. You survey your mental harvest. You know which thoughts can no longer accompany you and which are your true nourishment. Decide, not out of fear, not out of duty, but out of love for yourself, because the kingdom is already within you, and the only obstacle is your thought. Affirm now that I accept only ideas of truth. My mind is the channel of good. The Christ within me chooses now. And then walk no longer as a seeker, but as a bearer of the kingdom, no longer as a learner, but as a living expression of truth. For you have chosen. Your net is clean. And now, at last, you are one with correct thought.